Hey there, everybody. This is Peyton with Gathering Hope. I have today with me a really great guest. She's one of our board members. Kathryn Nader is a licensed professional counselor, and she's going to be going through a couple of the questions that you guys submitted. And I'm really just eager to have this conversation. I think it's an important one to have given what's going on in the world. But before I ask her to introduce herself, I just want to let you guys know that this conversation is just a conversation. It's not meant to take the place of any professional counseling or medical advice that you might receive from your own doctor. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's just a conversation. We're just going to be talking about some helpful stuff. So Kathryn, good morning.
Good morning.
I think when we're posting this, it'll be afternoon, but
okay.
If you would tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a licensed professional counselor. I have a practice called Hope Counseling.
Okay, we're good.
Grieving.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Y'all, we've had some issues before we even started this. So anyway, keep going.
I'll just act like this is normal. So I have a practice in Weatherford where I specialize in women's mental health, but I also see clients online too, especially during this time. Telehealth is getting more popular. So, yeah.
I'm glad that you offer that. That's awesome.
Me too. It's been good.
Okay. Let's see, I have a list of questions for you, but just kind of to get us started, like this is just a really strange world that we're living in. It's strange that I'm not actually talking with you in person. It's strange that we're all kind of isolated in our homes, but I want to speak specifically today to the person who already has existing grief, a bereaved mom, who is already feeling lonely and isolated and has a lot of heavy grief, and then to add on, all of this extra stuff in a COVID-19 world. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. But, obviously this is kind of an unprecedented, it's an unexpected thing to happen. But for someone who's been experiencing grief prior to this new world that we've been thrown in, what can we expect in terms of thoughts, emotions, maybe even physical responses that might come up during a time like this?
I think from what I've been hearing from people that, just the normal grief responses, but then on top of that, when you feel isolated, I think that just kind of seems to complicate things when people feel like they can't have their normal stress relief or ways that are helpful for them to process their grief. So that might make it a little more difficult. But just normal things of grief are, we feel it in our body. We could feel really tired. We could feel really like, wanting to be really busy or like go do lots of things, which makes it hard when it's harder to do that. We could feel, obviously lots of different emotions of sadness or anger or guilt, regret, all those things. And so I think it's harder when we aren't able to be in person with other people to really talk about it. So being very intentional about reaching out, whether it's these kinds of conversations where you're looking at a screen or your phone, or going to the park and meeting a friend and giving the distance, but having that opportunity to reach out to people. And if you know of someone who's grieving, to take the time to reach out to them.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's so difficult when we're just not able to be together. And I know that has been important for me, but I didn't even take into consideration, a lot of us do try to stay busy. Right. And oftentimes that means going places. So I would love for you, if you or anybody in the comments section, to put some suggestions of how are you staying busy at home? What are some productive things that you can be doing at home to maybe take your mind off of things for a little while?
Yeah, that's good.
So I think that'd be good for people to jump in and tell us what they're doing. Can you speak to the woman who's experiencing a resurgence of some of the challenges that she may have felt like, I've been through this. I've been through this grief journey. I feel like I really kind of got like some healing and kind of a hold and kind of a grip on some normalcy in my life. And I feel like, okay, I'm doing great in this area, but might have a resurgence of those feelings and those emotions that have kind of come up unexpectedly. Can you talk a little bit to her about that?
Sure. I think grief is a journey. I don't think we ever like check things off of a list. And a lot of times when we feel like we're over a part of it, or we have some feelings that come back that we thought we were done with, we get frustrated because we think we're going backwards. And we think of grief as being a linear thing when I don't think it is. I think grief is very different than linear. I think it's all over the place. And when we start to get frustrated with ourselves because we have gone backwards, I think that we have a misunderstanding of what grief looks like, in the first place. Because a lot of times we'll have those emotions again. And when we feel guilty or we feel frustrated at ourselves for having these normal emotions, that doesn't help us, to feel guilty for feeling guilty, or, frustrated for feeling whatever.
Yes.
So I think just, first of all, just stopping the guilt of like, I'm going backwards or whatever it might be, and just acknowledging, here's where I am today. Here are the feelings that I'm having today. And maybe you've had those feelings before. Great. What was helpful for you when you had those feelings before? What did you do that was helpful then? Maybe some of those things you can't do now, in the midst of being in your house, but, maybe there's some things that can be adapted that you can do that are helpful to do now, but not to see it as, be mad or frustrated at yourself that you're going backwards, because really, it's just a journey that goes all over the place. So taking time, and the reality is when we're forced to slow down like we have been lately and our routines have changed, we do have more time to process and to think. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing if some of those things are coming up that you haven't really dealt with before. Instead of being scared or, feeling like it's, not good, to see it as, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to process this in a way that I haven't had time to do before. Obviously, if there's any, thoughts of self-harm or harming somebody else or anything like that, you want to get help immediately. But
absolutely.
And even just getting help. I mean, if you hit a point where you feel like you do need to reach out for help, then to do that. Self-care is really important. And it can be done on the, via video sessions. So there's not really a reason to not.
I think it's really refreshing for people like me and the other moms in our community to hear from a professional that it's not linear, because that kind of goes against what we hear from a lot of people, friends or family. And again, well-meaning friends and family, of course, but like, you should be past this, or you should be at this point in your, in your grief journey. And feeling like we are going backwards goes against everything that we're kind of told from the outside. And so,
like, you want to be successful in grieving. Like, there's a right way to do it. Like,
yes. I had my own counselor tell me, she said, you know that you can't get an A in grief, right? Achiever, check.
Yeah, right.
That's not
totally.
So I think just it kind of sounds like what you're saying is just even being aware that might be something that comes up is going to be helpful. And something that I share with friends, whether it's the loss of a baby or any kind of grief, is that that you can't skip any of it.
Right.
And
you
so
might think you skipped it, but it will come back.
Right. It will come back, and it will come back, and it will come back. And so I think your point about having time to deal with some of these things is a really great point. Like, I can't keep myself busy right now. And so taking time to, like, what are some ways that you suggest people handle this? Like journaling, or what are some activities that they can do?
I think journaling is, I mean, I love journaling. So I always think journaling is helpful. I think, going for a walk is always helpful. Taking time to like sit down and process, maybe even with your husband. Maybe you haven't really had uninterrupted time to just sit down and talk about some of this. Now, if you've got little kiddos at home, of course, that can be super challenging. But if there's an opportunity for that, that could be a good thing. I think, listening to music can be helpful, and sometimes just being still and quiet and just seeing, what comes can be really helpful, just to allow yourself to have those emotions and just give yourself permission to deal with them.
Yeah. I think that might be the one shining light in all of this, is that we are having time to just be still.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's us just processing through like listening to a song that might prompt some things to come up, or talking with a friend, or praying, like, what is God saying to you right now? What is God trying to minister into your heart? How is he trying to comfort you? Because I guarantee you he's trying to. And so just taking that moment to journal or pray or anything like that, I think those are all great suggestions. Let's see what I have next on my list here. Okay. What are some ideas for how this community can support the mental health of one another right now? Both in general, but especially right now. Like, how can we be supporting each other, the people who are in the lost community?
I think reaching out to one another, obviously, which y'all already do, and having that space for online community is huge. If there are opportunities to have, Zoom groups or chats, I think that's always helpful to have that opportunity for people, if they want to participate, to be able to talk to each other on the phone, if that works for anyone. Mm-hmm. I think just being honest and authentic and letting people know that what you're feeling is normal. And then also, here's when you need to get help, and getting help is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So.
Yeah, I think remembering that it is a good time to reach out to people is sometimes, not that we forget about others, but this is just a time to be intentional about making that time to reach out, even if it's just a text. Is just one of those like, even just, I'm thinking of you. You don't have to reply or anything like that, but just, I'm thinking about you today. I said a prayer for you today. But yeah, I'm trying to think, like, as an organization, we're trying to figure out, like, how can we connect moms, like, alone but together. So that's another area that I would welcome any ideas that you guys have, and again, in the comments, or send us an email, info@gatheringhope.net, to let us know of some ways that either like you've thought of and you want to invite others into that, or just something new that we haven't thought of yet. So I know that times like this, people become really, they become geniuses at different ways of communicating with each other. So, I mean, I have seen so many brilliant things over the last 3 days that that I hadn't even thought of, like, wow, that's a really good idea. So, so how we can be kind and supportive and intentional to each other in the grieving community, I would love for some other ideas about that. So I have a question. From Melina, and she says, we've kind of talked about this, but how do you cope with being at home? Grief can already be isolating, and then add to that the physical isolation on top of that. I think we've kind of already, talked about some ways that we can really be focusing on one another. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so. I think reaching out is helpful. And I think also, when we feel isolated, to, instead of just focusing on ourselves, which is hard not to do, but to also think, who else is feeling this way, and how can I help them? Like, sometimes that's helpful to take the attention off of ourselves, but to say, okay, what neighbors do I have around me who might need something? Or how can I reach out, to other people who are feeling how I'm feeling, and
Right.
what I would appreciate other people doing for me, in a way. It's like you're paying it forward, and it helps kind of you feel less isolated, but it also gives you that good feeling that I'm helping somebody else and I'm reaching out.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. Okay, I have another question that says, is it normal to be okay with like kind of retreating and making your own little nest at home? Like, what if I am kind of loving everything about this? Is that okay? Is that even, like, and can you address that?
Yeah, I think there's some people who this is like their perfect situation. Like they love having time at home and having their family all together. And I think that's great. There's definitely introverts among us who love having this time, and that's awesome. One of my favorite books about introverts is the Susan Cain book, Quiet.
Okay.
It's a really good book. The Power of Introverts in a World That Won't Stop Talking. I think that's what it is.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know. Clearly, I don't know anything about that.
It's an awesome book.
But yeah, on Amazon while we're sitting still here at home.
So I think definitely, not everyone is hating being stuck at home. A lot of people enjoy it.
Yeah. Speaking of books, can you think of any helpful resources that we can share with our moms, different books that you find might be good for us to, in our downtime to look into?
Yeah, Dr. O'Malley, who's a counselor here in Fort Worth, he's written a really great book called Getting Grief Right. With Tim Madigan, Tim Madigan wrote that Mr. Rogers book. So it's a good one. And then another one, I think it's Megan Devine. I don't have it in front of me, but it's Okay, You're Not Okay.
Oh, yes. I love, if you're not following her page, do it now. She is great. Yeah.
Those are probably my two favorite ones. But there's lots of great blogs, and there's a really great website, What's Your Grief?
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of great articles that they post on there. So.
Okay. If you think of anything after, I know I kind of put you on the spot about that one. If you think of anything after the conversation, we'll make sure and share it with everybody as well. Okay. I think that, forgot to ask Heather's question. If you could recommend just one thing, what is one singular thing I can do, or we can do to just center ourselves, like in the midst of, even though we're at home, like what could be chaos in your home? What's just one singular thing that you can do to kind of center yourself, like a practice, or what would you recommend to people?
I think being, mindfulness is a big thing right now, but I think that's really helpful as far as, I think we easily start thinking about, oh my gosh, what are we going to do the rest of this day? What are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do this week? What are we going to do this month? What if this gets extended? And we just kind of like go down this rabbit trail instead of just saying, okay, right now I'm okay. And I'm at home and my kids are here and they're fine and they're playing, they're watching their 20th video or their 20th, that's okay. And, just like to take stock and just be present where you are and just say, today, right now, we're okay. And we're going to figure this out. And then tomorrow when we wake up, okay, here's our plan for today. Like not to go on this overwhelming, I think that's when we struggle with anxiety, is when we start going way down the trail instead of we borrow that anxiety from the future versus just saying, okay, today, where are we today? What do we need to do today?
Yeah. Have you read Jenny Allen's new book? I think it's called Get Out of Your Head.
I haven't read it yet, but I have had it recommended to me. Yes.
She talks about, I haven't read all of it. And so I don't know that like I'm recommending it. I'm saying like we should, but like, let's look into it. Right. She, at the beginning of the book, she kind of talks about this spiral of like, we've got a thought, and then it kind of goes this way, and then it goes around and around and around and around. And then we end up with like a lie at the bottom about ourselves or our situation. I wish I knew the scripture right off the top of my head. Maybe you do, but like we can take those thoughts captive and do something different with them. And she kind of talks about the method of like how we're gonna flip that around. But I don't know what that might be called in the LPC world.
Yeah. There's lots of words for it. I mean, one of the things we call is catastrophizing. We catastrophize things. And then that's called thought stopping, which if you're using cognitive behavioral therapy, but basically it's a time where you stop your thoughts and you say, this basically, here's a record that's starting to play and I don't want to listen to it. I'm going to turn it off. And I even know people that like put a rubber band on their wrist to like snap it, or like, snap their fingers, or do something that's like, I see where this is going and it's not helpful. So I'm going to stop that now. And then I even know of people who it's like, give yourself worry time. Like, okay, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes at whatever time, or 10 minutes, or whatever you think you need to worry about this, If I start worrying now, no, this is not my allotted time. I'm going to worry at that time. And then set your clock, sit down, worry as much as you want, and then turn it off when the timer goes off and say, okay, my worry time is over. Now I'm moving on, and for some people that gives them a sense of control over that kind of stuff. But that's
some good tips. I had not heard of that before. But I know a lot of moms deal with that like spiral out of control, and like some, I think it's a really good idea. Like, I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to do what I need to do in this 10 minutes or whatever. I think that's a great tip. I love that.
Yeah. Well, and even keeping a list of it, because then it makes you feel this sense of like control over your worry. Like, okay, here are the things I need to worry about. Write them down, And then it's like, I have control over my worry. And you might get to that point and feel like I don't need to worry, or you might get to that point and feel like I don't even need this much time. But at least then you feel like I have control over these things. And sometimes it's helpful, like you said, that spiral, to actually write those thoughts down and to see how they're actually going. Because again, then you see, I do have control over where this is going. It doesn't just come out of the blue, or, it feels like so many thoughts when it's spiraling in your head, but when you write them down, actually it's just maybe 2 or 3 a lot of times. So it gives you that sense of control again over them, to say, and then also like with prayer, to bring them to God and say, here are my thoughts, like to journal those things and say, what do I do with these?
All very good, helpful tips. Anything else that maybe I haven't thought of to ask that you are just kind of helpful, any helpful tips, any resources that we haven't thought about or talked about that you want to share with people?
I think just being the community is the most important thing. Taking time for self-care. I know for a lot of us, when we've got kids at home, we feel like we need to take care of everybody else. But, if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of them. So figuring out a way with your spouse or with your schedule somehow where you have time to do the things that you need to do for you, so that you can take care of others. I think setting up a routine is really, really, really helpful. I think it's for kids to know. It doesn't have to, even if it's not this time to this time, but just a simple, like, after breakfast, we're going to do this. And then after that, we're going to, just having kind of a routine that helps everyone. So it's not Groundhog Day in pajamas every day. That's what it starts to feel like. It's like there's no end. Maybe even making a list of, I've talked with some moms about making a list of just with their kids of like, here are some fun things we can do. And it can be random things, but when you have that list to go to, or writing them on pieces of paper, putting them in a jar or something to pull out ideas, then it doesn't feel so overwhelming. It's like, look at all these things we can do. We can make chocolate chip cookies. We can play hide and seek. We can paint our nails. Like, it doesn't have to be big things, but just feeling like you have a list of things, and even a list of places we can safely go, whether it's the park or whether it's go for a walk, or, again, it helps you to not feel so isolated that you're stuck and can't get out.
Yes. We have some moms in our community who don't have children at home. They've experienced a loss, but they do not have living children at this point. So what are some things they can put on their list if they don't have kiddos with home with them?
I think, oh man, I think that just having the opportunity to have a reason to do the things maybe that you wanted to do. And now that you're home and maybe have a little more time, is there an instrument you've wanted to practice that you haven't played since high school? Is there, a book you've really wanted to read and you just never have time to read it? Or is there, a show you've really wanted to watch and now you have an excuse to binge watch it? I mean, just making a list of those things that and seeing it as an opportunity to do some of the things that we don't ever have time to do.
Right. I think that's kind of one of the small glimmers of light that we have in all of this, is that I think a lot of people are going to discover like new hobbies that they didn't have before, or just interests that they have a chance to pursue for the first time. And I am grateful for those. I think there is, I know that there's a lot of even like neuroscience to back up gratitude stuff.
Yes.
So, I mean, a grieving person never wants to be told, you need to look around and be thankful for everything. Like sometimes it's okay to say, this just sucks.
Yeah.
But finding those, like making a list of things to be thankful for. I remember when I first lost my son, my piece of gratitude was, I'm so grateful I still have the ability to be grateful for anything.
Yeah.
And just starting there, like I still have things to be grateful for, even though this is just so hard right now. So can you kind of speak to gratitude a little bit?
Oh, I think that's huge. I think gratitude is definitely huge, even if it's just writing 3 things you're thankful for, in your journal. I think that helps to focus our day when we have that gratitude perspective. I think writing thank you notes is probably one of the best things you can do.
Yeah.
Because you are, again, reaching out to somebody else who's isolated probably, but maybe there's a time that I always meant to tell them thank you for that, and now you have the time to write it. Maybe don't lick the letter, maybe use tape or stickers, but send them a note, and that gives you the time to write and really think about being grateful, but it also gives somebody else that opportunity to receive it. Or an email. I mean, even an email is kind of just a neat way to reach out and be mindful of the things that you have to be grateful for.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I received a thank you note from a friend and who had just gone through some really big challenges. And I was like, she wrote me a thank you note? Like, this was and I texted her and I said, this was so unnecessary. But, that sucker's on my fridge, because it was so meaningful to me on the other end of it, because of course I was, going to pray for her or help her any way that I possibly could. But now that you mention it, I'm sure it was healing for her to go, oh, I'm so loved, and just recalling those little small things of, during this really hard time, someone helped me. I love that.
Yeah.
That's and I think
it focuses your attention on those things and those people and makes you really, notice that.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for getting on here with us and sharing your wisdom. I am going to, if anybody wants to ask you any further questions, is that cool with you?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Okay, great. So when we post this, we'll make it available so that people can ask you additional questions after that. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ray and Kathryn. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.